Today, passing the torch, a fired-up Joe Biden addresses the opening night of the Democratic National Convention.
Because of all of you in this room and others, we came together in 2020 to save democracy.
Also ahead, Hamas urged to accept a US-backed bridging proposal that may lead to a ceasefire in Gaza. A bus driver charged over a triple road fatality in North Queensland 2 months ago. And childcare black holes. New data reveals there are twice as many children as there are places. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Kathryn Robinson. The US President Joe Biden has spoken at the first day of the Democratic National Convention in a symbolic passing of the torch to Vice President and 2024 nominee Kamala Harris. The outgoing president, who decided a month ago not to seek re-election, sought to defend his legacy while urging voters to unite behind Ms. Harris. In a forceful and at times emotional speech, Mr. Biden painted the Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump as a threat to democracy.
He's promising a bloodbath if he loses, in his words. And that he'll be a dictator on day one, in his own words. By the way, this sucker means it. No, I'm not joking. Think about it. Anybody else said that in the past, you'd think he was crazy. He is crazy, but you'd think it was an exaggeration, but he means it. We can't let that happen. For 50 years, like many of you, I've given my heart and soul to our nation. And I've been blessed a million times in return with the support of the American people. I've either been too young to be in the Senate because I wasn't 30 yet, and too old to stay as president. But I hope you know how grateful I am to all of you. I can honestly say, and I mean this in the bottom, give you my word as a Biden, I can honestly say I'm more optimistic about the future than I was when I was elected as a 29-year-old United States Senator. I mean it. Folks, we just have to remember who we are. We're the United States of America. And there's nothing we cannot do when we do it together.
I'm joined now for more on this by the CEO of the US Studies Centre, Michael Green. Michael, a star-studded opening day of the National Convention there for the Democrats. We had Hillary Clinton, Kamala Harris in that Spies edition, but obviously it was a lot about Joe Biden tonight, last night US time. How would you characterise the tone of the event?
Well, it was excitement. This would have been a very tough convention, frankly, if Joe Biden had been the candidate, because the polls were so bad for him. So there's a sense of energy in the Democratic Party you can really sense.
Down well with a number of the coalition staffers who've been telling us this is a really bad look when the rest of the community is doing it very tough with cost of living pressures. They also say a lot of these things used to routinely come up in these enterprise agreements when negotiations were underway with the former government, and they got knocked back. One of them said they came for everything but the kitchen sink and they left with everything including the kitchen sink.
Well, researchers and scientists are starting to learn the grave neurological risks of war and training on soldiers. Scientists have discovered that the invisible blast waves soldiers are repeatedly exposed to are causing new kinds of visible physical brain injury. Sarah Helliwell, Research Fellow at Curtin University and the Parent Institute, joins me now from Perth. Sarah, thank you for your time.
Good evening.
Can you explain this type of brain injury known as mild traumatic brain injury and how these pressure waves or blast waves are impacting the brain?
Sure. So a mild traumatic brain injury is often referred to as a concussion. And this is an injury that will cause symptoms. Someone may feel headaches, they may feel dizzy, nauseous, a range of different symptoms. And so we tend to think of these mild traumatic brain injuries or concussions happening in contexts like sport, but they also happen very prominently in the military, where instead of hitting our head, we have the passage of a blast wave, which can move through our brain, through the skull, through the body, and directly cause damage to the brain tissue itself.
Yeah, wow. I understand that there's not a lot of research here, but there is some overseas on military personnel. What does that tell us?
Yes, that's right. So this research shows that there are more and more evidence of long-term consequences of these brain injuries. So we tend to see if people have repetitive injuries, like they might sustain during training, they may have problems with their thinking, their mood, what we call their cognitive function. They may have persistent headaches. They may have visual problems, hearing loss. There's a really, as I say, a real raft of different symptoms. And what we see that long term, these people often will have problems that start to really impede their life and their relationships as well.
So what sort of weapons are causing these injuries? I mean, are there some weapons that are safer than others?
It's really difficult to say because we don't have our own Australian data on what safe distances are and safe levels of blast exposure are. So what we know from the literature on overseas militaries is that these are weapons like recoilless rifles, grenades, these are clearance divers, these are infantry, these are artillery personnel. And what we're seeing is that the people who are the trainers who are teaching people how to use these weapons in a safe way so that they can employ them when they need to on the battlefield are having these exposures, because while the person who's learning to use the weapon may use it, 1 or 2 times in that day, the person training may have 30 or 40 exposures. And that may not be enough to cause an overt concussion or blast injury, but it could be enough to cause what we call subconcussion, which is a sub-threshold injury. And we think that having a lot of these sub-threshold injuries could cause these long-term problems.
Yeah, okay. I know you worked for the Canadian military for several years on blast injury. What are some of the protections that could be put in place now to stave off these injuries?
Yeah, so what we really need to do now is establish our own guidelines for what is safe and what is tolerable. We need to look into appropriate eye protection, hearing protection, and whether we can have benefits to the body and the brain in terms of helmets and tactical gear that can help prevent and repel these blast waves.
Yeah, a really interesting topic of discussion. Dr. Sarah Helliwell, many thanks for your thoughts.
Thank you.
Now for the latest sport headlines, we're joined by Daniel Garb. Hi, Dan. In Melbourne, in fact, they've spoken today about one of these controversies surrounding one of its biggest players.
Yeah, arguably their biggest player and one of the biggest names in the AFL in Christian Petrarca, who has been in the news, it's fair to say, over the last few days amid reports that he wants out of the Melbourne Demons and wants a trade, Petrarca. So he was seen at training today. There have been no denials from the Petrarca camp as of yet in regards to those reports that he wants out of the Demons. He's addressed the playing group yesterday. The D's are adamant he's going nowhere. They've re-signed Jack Viney and Max Gawn to new deals in the last couple of days, so they are remaining defiant, Melbourne. But until Petrarca comes out and says, I do not want to trade away, this story will continue to grow legs. The D's have missed the finals. Petrarca's missed the season after the Queen's birthday clash with Collingwood with a ruptured spleen. His coach today, Simon Goodwin, addressed the issue.
He's going to be at this footy club, for the next 5 years. He's got 5 years to go in his contract, and he's going to be part of the red and blue. And as I said, part of this process is to give a greater, deeper level of understanding of what he's gone through, and then to move forward together as one. And we will. That's the plan that we've all got, is to be fully connected and together as one, and Christian will be at the footy club for the next 5 years.
And the AFL AFL, the upcoming AFLW season was launched today.
That it was. So it gets underway next week in the bye week of the AFL men's before they hit finals action, and it'll be a great time for the AFLW to commence yet another season. Brisbane are the reigning premiers. The season will begin with Sydney taking on Collingwood at North Sydney Oval. West Coast and Richmond do battle on the same night. That's a Friday night next weekend. Brisbane looking to go back to back. They've won it before, so they know what it's like to have a bit of a target on their back, and their captain addressed that today at the launch.
Had that privilege before, but yeah, it definitely doesn't make things any easier, and you know people are going to be after you, and there's nothing better than beating the reigning premiers. So that's been not at the front of our minds, but it's definitely been a thought that we've spoken about and we've processed, and I think going about that the right way is important.
Now, I don't know how shocking this was, but I was quite shocked by it. One of our Olympic medalists will be an Aussie no more.
Yeah, it's more the detail around the story that I think is really interesting and will upset a lot of people in Australian sport. So Matthew Richardson, who won a silver medal at the Paris Olympics in the sprint cycling, will now represent Great Britain moving forward. He was born there, he moved to Perth as a 9-year-old. That might not irritate people too much, but the way in which it's come about perhaps will. So back in February, he was already meeting with Team Great Britain behind Australia's back at a meet. And he has admitted in the UK papers that he had to keep that quiet because he risked deselection from the Australian Olympic team. So he kept it quiet to ensure he went to the Olympics. He won a silver medal. That's great for Australia. But now he will be representing Great Britain moving forward. And he said that is the right move for his career. So big story in Australian sport.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
And there's more on the ABC News app and on ABC iView. I'm Kathryn Robinson. Thanks for your company. Stay with us. I'll have more news coming up on the ABC News channel.